Hey guys, it's Christy with Stone Family Farmstead. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing 5 homeschooling tips that will help you get started. In the wake of all that's happened with coronavirus over the past few months, parents have found themselves forced to homeschool their kids, much to their dismay and nervousness. I've had a few people call me and message me, ask me what they should be doing for their children. And, they just don't even know where to start. So I thought I would do a video to share what I would do if I were in their position. I'm going to be sharing information for those parents who just want to survive until their kids can go back to school, as well as information for parents who, in light of the latest news of schools opening up while coronavirus still lurks out there, if they want to keep their children home for longer than summer, I'm going to give information about that too, or even if they want to continue for the rest of their child's educational career. Please note that I don't consider myself an expert on this topic, but rather an ex-homeschooling mom with 20 years of homeschooling under her belt. So I started homeschooling my 3 children in 1995 when my eldest daughter was in 1st grade. She was being bullied, and we were concerned about our kids' safety and other things, what they were going to be learning in school and those kinds of things. We were just a young family trying to find our way in the area of child rearing in the 90s. So fast forward, my youngest graduated from school in 2015. And like I mentioned before, it gave me 20 years of homeschooling children from kindergarten all the way up through their senior year in high school. It's my hope that I can help you have a little more peace of mind, whether you're homeschooling for a short time or for longer. So I have 5 tips that I'm going to share with you. Tip number 1, determine how long you want to homeschool your child or children. Are you homeschooling just until the schools open back up, or are you homeschooling for maybe a couple of years, or are you homeschooling all the way through their senior year in high school? Of course, you've probably already been homeschooling for a few months now, and perhaps this information comes late for you, but in case you're planning to homeschool your children until the schools open back up, my best suggestion is to teach math and English and or grammar at the level they are at right now. If you don't know what that level is, I did a quick search to see what I could find that might help you, and a website called Year Round Homeschooling has a list of placement tests for the homeschooling parents to figure out where their children land in reading, math, and English. There's probably more stuff on there than that, but that's really all I was looking for. And so these are the areas that are the most important. If you're just planning on homeschooling for a short time and then putting your children back into school, that should help them stay caught up, in a general sense, and make it easier for them as they enter back into the school system. If you're planning to homeschool for longer or for the duration of your child's educational career, I would suggest doing the placement tests as well on Year-Round Homeschooling site, in the same way as I explained for those that are homeschooling for a shorter time. I'm going to give you that website in the show notes, so don't forget to check there. Once you've figured out where your children land in math, English, and reading, you're going to need to shop for curriculum that covers those grade levels. Now, you might find that your child doesn't, maybe if your child's in 5th grade, but they don't test into 5th grade curriculum. I'm going to talk more about curriculum a bit later, but going back to the Year-Round Homeschooling site, some of those placement tests that are offered are actually connected to curriculum that would tell you where your child lands in their curriculum. So understand that. And if that's helpful for you, great. You can just buy that curriculum if you want to. If you don't want to buy any curriculum and you're only going to homeschool your kids just until the schools open up and it's safe and everything, check with your kids' teachers to see if they have materials from the curriculum that they've been using all year, so that you can use that to continue your child's education. If that's not available, there's really inexpensive workbooks at your local big box store that you can use to keep your kids challenged and busy for the duration. But understand that even if you have a 5th grade child, depending upon the curriculum that they've been using in school, they may or may not know the things that are in there. So don't get frustrated with that. Just understand that, that's the way that it is. Every curriculum is different. On to tip number 2. If you plan to homeschool longer, choose how you will homeschool. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can homeschool privately, and privately just means that you as the parent will be completely responsible for your child's education, pretty much 100%. All of the onus is on you to choose curriculum, teach school for a certain number of days per year, teach most subject material, make sure that your children get proper socialization, and you'll foot the bill for the whole endeavor. So if you want to have like 100% control, you're going to want to privately homeschool. The other option you have is you could choose a public option. And so what that looks like is charter schools or online public schools. And so if you choose one of those options, I'm sure there's probably more, but I'm kind of out of the loop now, but I do know those are pretty much still happening, especially the online public schooling options. So if you choose those, curriculum, teaching days, and costs are pretty much covered, I think. Either that or, they're definitely not going to be as expensive as if you privately homeschool, but you can't give your children school credit for religious studies. You can't have as much flexibility as you might like to. So the other thing that you can check into, and this was available to me back in 1995, is to see if your local school that your children are attending or your child's attending has a homeschool program. I don't know that this even exists anymore, but it's worth a look. And I found when I did it for the first year that I homeschooled, I found it to be really, really helpful because the teacher sat with me and showed me how to lesson plan, showed me how to teach, and talked to me and helped me, through the first year of homeschooling. So that was really, really cool. Tip number 3. Find out your state's homeschooling requirements. So some states like Texas, Idaho, and Alaska have really loose rules and don't require you to give notification to the state if you choose to homeschool in those states. In other states like New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, these states have really very high regulations in place. So it's going to be really important for you to know what your state requires. In California, where I live, all homeschooling parents must file an affidavit every year to notify the state of our intent to homeschool privately. So we're not part of the public school system like a charter or K-12. This is if we choose to homeschool privately. So there are also requirements for keeping attendance, immunization records, courses of study, and a few other things. But generally, it's a pretty easy set of standards to meet. I think another standard or another thing we were supposed to do was to keep a fireproof safe with their cumulative files in it. And there's that as well. And so you don't want to lose you want to use a fireproof safe because you don't want to lose your kids' educational records just in case you have to put them back into school. So there's that. If you choose to homeschool privately, you'll want to find out if you need to file an affidavit or notify your state in some way. What do they require for private homeschoolers regarding like which subjects must you teach, which have more flexibility? You need to find out if yearly testing is required. Some states do. My state didn't do that. Can you teach your religious beliefs if that's something that's important to you? Is there anything else your state requires that you need explanation for? So I am going to share my screen really quick so I can show you a website that might interest you. And let me see where that's at. And so I should be sharing, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so I'm sharing right now a website called HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Many private homeschoolers become members of this site. You can, or you don't have to. But I want to draw your attention specifically to this page. It's hslda.org/legal that shows you like where to find the information about what your state requires. So you can just kind of scroll down here. This is my state. And so if I click on California, it will take me to California, and I can just scroll down and it tells me right here that there's low regulation in California. There are 3 options for homeschooling, and I believe that is homeschooling as a private school that I've talked about before, homeschooling with a private school satellite program, like a PSP. Those would be like accredited schools, I believe, or a school that actually is a school. It's not just like schooling at home. Actually, let's go in here. Option 2, homeschooling with a private school satellite program. And so that explains right here what that is. The majority of the instruction is provided at home, and it's an operated private school, but you're not necessarily picking everything out like the curriculum and things like that. Homeschooling via instruction by a private tutor. And so this is something that I don't remember being a thing when I was homeschooling, but yeah, so if you needed somebody to help you teach or whatever, or you wanted them to teach, this person would need to have a teaching credential for the grade level that you were asking your child to be taught. So then it looks like there are some other things, like the child must be taught for at least 3 hours a day between 8 and 4 for 175 days. So anyway, I'm not going to read it all to you, but there are some really specific things. So then you can go back and you can see, you know, what the age is. I think in Alaska, they're only required to go until 16 years old. Notification required, that's the affidavit I was talking about. Teacher qualifications, no, except option 3. And option 3 was if you are going to have somebody tutor your child. State mandated subjects, which means that there are specific subjects that they want you to teach. Assessment requirements would be whether or not they need you to test. And immunization requirements, which means like, do they allow you to waive, you know, immunizations if you want to, and in California they do. So anyway, there's a lot of information that can be got there, and so that is something that I wanted to show you. It's just a ton of info. So let me stop sharing really quick and we'll go on to tip number 4. Okay, tip 4 is choose curriculum. So this is going to be more for those that are wanting to privately homeschool. So you want to decide whether you want to track with your state's scope and sequence. And all a scope and sequence is guidelines for which grades learn which topics in each subject. So I hope that is clear. So mostly you would want to do that if you are preparing them for re-entry into the system at some point, or if you wanted to have that flexibility to you know, be able to put your child back into school and have them kind of hopefully slip in at the grade level that they would be in, for the grade level that's appropriate for their age. So I did that. I wanted to do that. And so I kind of followed the state of California scope and sequence and tried to make sure that my kids got specific things out of the curriculum that I was using. And then I didn't worry too much about some of the other things if we didn't have time. But I wanted to make sure that, they knew what the state of California said they wanted, or said it wanted them to know. You'll also want to ask yourself if you're interested in a non-conventional type of homeschooling, like unschooling. So I didn't do unschooling. I did some more relaxed homeschooling. There are people that really like just very structured homeschooling with lots of topics, lots of books, lots of subjects and things like that. And then people that don't want to have that kind of a rigid homeschooling schedule, but rather they might want to do unschooling, which is kind of student-led rather than curriculum-led. So you'll want to do some research in those things and see what fits your family best. Also, do you want your children to learn from an accredited source? If so, you'll need to research accredited schools rather than accredited curriculum. Curriculum isn't accredited, only schools can be. So examples of accredited schools would be like K-12 Academy, which is an online public school, Alpha Omega Academy, or Abeka Academy. Those are both Christian options if you prefer something like that. I'm sure there are other options for people that are of different religions and things like that. And so you'll just have to do some research. Tip number 5, don't forget proper socialization. Back in the day when we were homeschooling, socialization was kind of a dirty word in the circles that I ran in. It was sort of something that was poo-pooed, though we all did it. It was sort of a buzzword that people used when they were speaking against homeschooling. And so, like our kids weren't being properly socialized. It just means that, they're not being socialized in the exact same way that public school children would be. And so I think that's the reason why people kind of poo-pooed that. But I've come to believe that kids need to be around other kids. I don't know how frequently. I'm sure it depends on the child, but preferably in a peer group that they can grow up with. Parents can't be everything to their kids, and it's been my experience that when we try, kids can end up resentful and other things, other negative things that we don't want to happen. In a peer group, they can make mistakes and sometimes even make mistakes that hurt, and we need to let them do that so that they can learn how to deal with the feelings that go along with those experiences. One thing I noticed during our homeschooling career was that many parents weren't allowing their children to make mistakes. They were protecting them, just really sheltering them. And we did it too. And a lot of our kids, became stunted in some ways. It's not like earth-shattering or anything like that. It's not the worst thing. I mean, all parents make mistakes with their kids, or, all kids have hardships and stuff when they're little and everything, and that affect them, up through adulthood and everything. But it's just, something to think about. So, of course, no parent is going to be perfect, and we certainly weren't, but we did achieve some really wonderful things through homeschooling. If we had to do it over, though, I think we might make a few different decisions, with our homeschooling and with how much we sheltered our kids. But that's just my opinion, and that's just my personal experience. So here are some ways that you can help your children get socialization that feels safe and at the right level for you guys. A homeschooling support group. So you'll want to think about what you need out of a homeschool support group. Do you want it to offer classes for you? That might be more along the lines of a PSP or an ISP. Or, maybe a homeschool group that, the parents pull together and, and teach. We did that a lot of times with science or history or something like that. Do you want your homeschool group to offer support for you? Like, what curriculum can I buy? Or cry on somebody's shoulder, if you need to, because it's frustrating, to be with your kids 24/7. And do we want it to offer playmates to your children so they can get away from you? Do we want it to offer a floating peer group, a peer group that your kids can grow up with? All of those can be found inside of a homeschool group. But what is available in each group varies. So back when I ran a homeschool group, we offered support for moms. You know, we could cry on each other's shoulder, we could get together, we could, you know, talk about curriculum or whatever, we could share things. We offered a K through 12 peer group, so all the kids hung out together, which was really nice because the kids learned to deal with a lot of different ages of children. And that was really a plus. We had monthly hot dog and marshmallow roast, which was really fun. We had field trips and, you know, some other things like that. That was what our homeschool group did. And another way to get some socialization for your kids is extracurricular activities. That could be in the form of team sports, if your kids like that, martial arts, art or dance classes through your city. They could be teacher-led activities. I know that I bought books on art and drawing and things like that. Remember that we bought a set of books on drafting and taught that to our son because he was interested in that. And now he actually you know, works with drafting, so he does that kind of work. So it's really neat that, you know, with your extracurricular activities or your electives, you know, when you get up toward junior high and high school, you can actually tailor those things to things that your kids like or what they want to be when they grow up and things like that. So we actually wrote curriculum that helped our daughter to decide whether or not she wanted to be a veterinarian. So she did specific things having to do with animals and all that. And, you know, she just ended up deciding against that. So, you know, that's okay. She got the school credit for it. So anyways, there are so many options out there for extracurricular activities, or you can just get creative and write something yourself. It just really depends on how you homeschool, whether privately or in a public school. Online type thing, or, you know, charter school or whatever. It just depends. You just have to see what parameters you have to work with. So I hope these 5 tips have helped you today. Homeschooling can be like a super daunting endeavor. It really is a lot of responsibility, and you really do have to be able to manage it, you know. But all in all, it's a really rewarding activity that your family can do, and it enables us to get to know our kids in ways that we may not have been able to if they were out of the house, you know, 7 hours a day, 35 hours a week. So even if we're doing it just for a short time, it can be really rewarding. So thanks for watching. Leave me a comment if you have any questions, or if I wasn't clear about something, or you need, you know, some further explanation. Remember, the links that I mentioned will be in the show notes, so don't forget to grab those. Also, please subscribe for videos on gardening, food preservation, homestead planning, and all manner of self-sufficient living. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.